I wonder, Dina, if we should change the name of today's show to Unanimity, instead of Unprecedented. We're at the tail end. We're in the home stretch of the United States Supreme Court's term. They're trying to wrap mainly the right-wing MAGA to go on all those Federalist Society paid-for junkets. Yes, they still do that. And they've got dozens of decisions left to be dropped. And we just had 3 or 4 that have happened in the last several days that Dina Doll, my colleague on Unprecedented, and I thought our audience needs to know about these. And it's a feel-good moment, I guess, for John Roberts, Dina, because he got 3 cases to be 9-0, so he can say, like, next year on his January State of the Court address that many cases were unanimous, and we're not as politically driven apart and fractured as people claim, and it's not an existential threat to the court. Yeah, I don't buy it. We'll talk about the 9-0, and not only 9-0, but talk about political theater. You and I will talk about who's writing each of the 9-0 decisions. Spoiler alert, it's the moderates on the Supreme Court who finally got bones thrown to them, not the 3 women, not the MAGA right. Let's bring in Dina Doll. Hey, Dina.
Hello.
Hello. Before we get into it, because I had to notice, because you and I go way back and we've been friends now for a long time. Our husbands and wives have met, and we're friends outside the office, as they say. And I've never seen you wear a T-shirt. And I get on today and I say, that's not only a T-shirt with some sort of crown on it. I know you were a delegate for the Democrats in California. I know there was a convention because I watch your social media fervently, and I know you're an active participant there. Why don't you show off your credentials and talk about your T-shirt a little bit to get our audience all jazzed up for our show today?
Yeah, I'm so excited because people were on fire there. And here's my T-shirt. It's Fight Fascism, Get Shit Done, Save Democracy. And there are just so I'm a delegate, as you say, to the California Democratic Party. Here's my badge. And what it is each state has kind of like, we all watch in the DNC convention, right? Where you get the presidential nominees is giving speeches. Each state has a version of that. California is, of course, quite big because California is so big and the Democratic Party is so strong there. And this convention was our convention to start organizing. We talk to each other. We try to figure out which candidates we're going to support in the midtimes. These candidates start galvanizing support issues. One of the events, this is where I got the T-shirt, was organized by the Nurses Association and the Teachers Association in California. So shout out to the nurses and teachers who raise our children and teach them despite getting shot at, and the nurses who help save everyone's lives. I've got actually in my immediate family a ton of nurses and teachers, and they get shit done, as they say here. So just wanted to give a shout out to that and remember how much we need to always support them. And I've got my reproductive freedom for all California. They're just...
Where's my swag? Not to be make it about me, but where is my swag from this convention?
I know. I might have to send you one. I got a lot.
Yeah.
Democrat. I mean, here's the thing. I have to say, I was able to take a deep breath because... Yeah. Talk about being around like-minded people. It feels so, so good. And I have to say that if you are in a red state, I was talking to people, there's a lot of Democrats organizing in red states. And there are some red states that have openings for delegates that just aren't being filled. Like you could just sign up to be a delegate. So if you are a blue dot in a red state, we need to take back even state governments. And you may not create a majority, but if you even can help elect one blue candidate, we can slow things down. So I would encourage anybody to try to reach out to their local Democratic clubs. And if you don't have one because you're in a red area, reach out to your Democratic officials. Try to find out how to get involved. We really need people in even the red states to get involved. And I ran into some Midas Mighty at the convention, other fellow delegates. In fact, somebody who had seen our Unprecedented show the week before.
Nice.
So just like shout out, like Midas Mighty, Legal AFers, Unprecedented, like we are everywhere.
What I
And
like about I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
yeah, no, it felt good to feel like, we sometimes are here on our Zoom talking to each other, and then you go out in the real world. And like I like to say over and over, we are the majority, and we have to remember that and not feel defeated by what's going on.
What I like about the story that you're telling is it dovetails so nicely with what we try to say at the end of every hot take or podcast or anything else on Legal AF for the Midas Touch Network, which is to give a call to action so that people don't feel despondent. Like, I don't want people to fall into the internet. Okay. I want them to take this knowledge, and for the reason we formed this collaboration, this fellowship, and this movement is to empower people with knowledge, and so that we speak truth to each other first, so that then we can go into the streets, into the public square of ideas, and try to capture some hearts and some minds. And as I say frequently on the hot takes, we no longer have the luxury to be a silent majority. We can't be silent anymore. Right. We have to, to paraphrase the old movie Network, we got to throw open the window and stick our head out and say we're mad as hell. We're not going to take it anymore. Mm-hmm. And you're showing what can be done. So sit and watch lots of hours of Midas Touch and Legal AF for sure. It helps. However, at some point, you need to interact with the real world. And these are the ways that you can do it. Signing up for local clubs. I joined here. I have a similar, smaller scale version of your story. I was taking the baby into a beautiful independent bookstore. Shout out to independent bookstores in Coral Gables, Florida, called Books and Books, and which is a lovely courtyard, and then a children's section. And my wife and I were going in there after breakfast a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman manning it, putting up a banner about voter registration, and she didn't know who I was. And I came up behind her and I said, "How's that going?" And Miami's sort of a mixed town. It votes blue, but there's a lot of red.
Okay,
red, and a lot of red in power. And she looked at me and she said, it's a little bit of a struggle, but it's important. And then I talked a little bit more, and she said, "Oh my God, are you Michael Popok?" I said, "Yes," because she recognized my voice. Turns out she's a former retired U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney in Miami, who works on voter suppression now.
Oh, nice.
So I joined with them and the local Democrats, and to come up, and we're going to try to use this platform too to help in voter registration, mail-in voting registration, and the like. So
love that.
Yeah, the things that we talk about here have real world consequences, and that's why we want to update people on the show. And I think that's why this particular show and you on the network resonate so much with our audience, because there's the seriousness of learning without blowing smoke or sunshine, as we like to say. But then there's the hopefulness of what can we do about it. And we're 137 days, I know it seems longer, of the Trump administration. It's seriously, when I said that to somebody recently, yesterday or today or whatever, they were like, "Oh, that's it? 137 days? I feel like I'm in prison counting down on the wall, when it's over." But it will be over. And as Elon Musk so eloquently put it, I'm going to wait him out. I'm younger and richer than Donald Trump. I mean, the time horizons don't match with Musk and Trump.
No.
Nor with us, and nor with the long arc of history.
Sure.
Donald Trump will be out of office. The question is not what's the old line about in the old boxing metaphor? It's not when everybody gets dropped to the canvas. The question is, how do you get up? And what do you do when you get up? All right, we hit the canvas. It wasn't the election that we wanted, but now in opposition and in resistance, what do we do to get ready for the midterms and to get ready for the presidential election? And even now, how to stop that abomination of a budget from getting over this? It's never going to get the 60 votes it needs to avoid the filibuster in the Senate.
No, not
anymore. But we got to pull it together and just wait for things to happen that we couldn't even have expected, like Donald Trump attacking the Federalist Society, like Donald Trump and Elon Musk firing each other and breaking up with each other in public and pulling that party apart, which only two egotistical, narcissistic billionaires can do. Because once again, it demonstrates they don't care about you. They don't care about you.
Yeah.
They care about their money, their taxes, the amount of cash they're going to die with. That's what they care about, not the other stuff. Supreme Court doesn't really care about you either, by the way.
1,000%. And just really quickly, Governor Tim Walz does care, and his speech at the convention, I felt like he was the one speaker who really got how much we need to change as a party, and we need to start really focusing on the issues people care about, probably because he went through the paces more than anybody else with it. And I had a brief chance to talk to him about it afterwards, and I saw your photo on Instagram. And in the middle of the photo, I think I'm literally talking in the middle of the photo. That's why my picture is kind of odd, but I was telling him I was a Midas contributor, and he was like, we've got everything we need. And we have everything we need. Yeah. And I do think that the broken bromance, as people are calling it, with the feud and Musk, just shows how much they don't care about us, because nowhere in there is there a conversation about us. It's all about like, I'm going to sell your Tesla. Like, I'm going to impeach you. It's like, so Legal AF, Midas, all of us we have to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And while that noise goes.
What's the old line? Keep your head while those around you are losing theirs.
There you go.
They are losing their heads. Stay calm. What's the old line from London? Stay calm, carry on, listen to our podcast. Let's get to this weird confluence of events with at the end here, and they did it on purpose because they control the timing of when these opinions are dropped, and the batching of them and the grouping of them. It's not random. It's not being spit out of a vending machine. Somebody made the decision, John Roberts, which decisions were going to drop in the last couple of days and in what order. And he grouped the 901s together so he could have some sort of bullshit kumbaya moment. Let's break it down. We got the Catholic charter schools tax exemption issue written by Sotomayor 90. We've got the reverse discrimination, a white straight woman who had her case dismissed because they didn't find that is discriminatory, that the white, says she got discriminated against by her gay LGBTQ plus boss. And we have a 9-0 decision written by Ketanji Brown Jackson. Of course, look at the optics. The Black justice writes about reverse discrimination. Sotomayor, who's Catholic, writes about the Catholic charities.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah. Good catch on that.
And Kagan, who I assume likes Mexican food, wrote about Mexico's case against the United States for gun violence and for gun distribution. So why don't you kick it off? You want to do what do you want to start with first?
Let's talk about the Catholic charities. You started off with that. I have to say, I'm all for them when they do agree, even if it feels, like you said, kind of like strategic on her part. There's so much bad news. I like it, at least that they could agree. And I do like that they had like you say, liberal or more moderate justices write it, because they're brilliant women and they're creating law. So at least I like that part. But okay, so basically what happened with the Catholic charities, and everybody who's been watching our show kind of has this, but I'm going to recap it again. The Catholic charities in Wisconsin wanted to opt out of paying taxes into the unemployment insurance program that the state of Washington had, because they wanted to basically be a part of the Catholic Church's unemployment insurance program. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court said no, even though state law allowed for an opt-out for a religious organization, because the Catholic charities employed people who were not Catholic, served people that were not Catholic, and did not proselytize. And that's the key word in this opinion. They didn't proselytize. They evangelized, which was them giving to the poor or the needy or, whichever groups they were giving to. But at the time, they weren't like handing out teachings or teaching people about their religion. And so Justice Sotomayor said that, the government cannot prefer one type of religion or one type of denomination. So if you had a church, maybe Jehovah's Witness, let's say, where they would only be doing something like this if they were preaching at the same time, they would be granted the exemption. But the Catholic Church, who didn't believe in that being part of their charitable work, didn't get it. That is not being neutral, and the government has to be neutral. It can't prefer one or the other. And so it was unconstitutional for the Wisconsin to deny them the religious exemption based on that.
And to put it into some plainer English, the Mormons and the Jehovah Witnesses knock on your door, and the Catholics don't.
Yeah,
the Catholics and the Jews don't, and that's the difference between proselytizing and evangelism. It's really at the doorbell. And Sotomayor, it was interesting in her commentary. She had a great line. She said, "This test that we've established might be hard to apply at the trial court level, but this case is not that case where it's difficult. This case is easy." She's not, but listen, she developed the test, so they're going to have to live with it. But the way that works with Supreme Court is, if the trial judges have difficulty with the test and the standards that the Supreme Court established, sometimes they take another case to try to fix it. Yeah. So things are fixable if they see that the trial court levels are struggling. Like right now, we're watching the trial court levels, sort of struggle with all these emergency applications and the resulting half a paragraph decisions by the Supreme Court instead of 20 or 30 or 40 pages or more, and then always followed by some sort of statement or concurrence, which we'll talk about when we get to the gun cases, that go on for pages. And then the trial court's like, how are we supposed to interpret this? Although, for instance, in the we're not going to talk this particular episode about the immigration deportation due process issues, although they are rapidly moving up the chain to the Supreme Court with two blowout rulings by Judge Jeb Boasberg and Judge Zinnes in the last 48 hours against the Trump administration. But there, the takeaway was sort of, even though they were one paragraph long, was sort of like no-brainers. We could all understand due process and notice through habeas corpus in the United States before you start deporting. I mean, that was the takeaway among three cases, if you want to just distill it to its essence. And while 100 pages to kind of put the fine point on that might have been interesting, we didn't need it. But for some other concepts, trial courts look for guidance from the Supreme Court. And we'll have to see how much guidance they're going to get from this. So 9-0, Catholic charities, no church and state separation, really going to the free exercise clause of not the establishment clause, not a church and state issue per se, just treating all religions, regardless of their tenets, equally. But there's no requirement that a state exempt anybody. But if you're going to exempt some religious organization from some policy of yours, then you have to do it even-handedly and uniformly. I sort of agree with that. I sort of agree with that, right?
No, it did. And that's why they were all able to agree. Because if you are, you shouldn't probably preference that. It was clearly a Catholic. I mean, it's funded by the Catholic Church. It's part of the diocese. Like, it was so Catholic. Clearly part of the Catholic Church. Yeah. I
wonder if there was a struggle internally for Amy Coney Barrett, who's the super Catholic on the panel, who worked at, was a professor at University of Notre Dame and all that, to write the opinion. But Sotomayor, she's 72, 73, I'm hoping we get a lot more years with her, but I'm glad she wrote that one. Next 9-0, reverse discrimination. Oh boy, white people in America can get discriminated against too. That's the doesn't come as, in the political environment that we're in. Is anybody shocked that whiteys can sue for discrimination also? But you look what they've done with affirmative action. Look what they've done since the 70s forward with dismantling any type of helpful hand to minorities to equalize them on the playing field. And so, this woman claims in her lawsuit, which has now been reinstated, that she was denied a job or promotion because she was discriminated against because she wasn't gay, and her boss was, or part of that community. And what happened there with Ketanji Brown Jackson writing for the 9-0 majority?
So basically what it is, and shout out honestly to these women, because I do think that they always take the case based on the facts and the law. And that's the difference between our side, let's say, and the others who try to always get an end result. Because, she really wrote that Congress, when they wrote Title VII, which was the rule, the law against discrimination in the workplace, it applied to all individuals. That's how they wrote it. And so they needed to defer with how Congress wrote it. What some of the lower courts were doing was adding in an element of requirement. If you were part of the majority, you had to prove background circumstances. So it was like an extra harder burden for that plaintiff to prove. Like you had to show that maybe the employer had a pattern, or that there was something more than just a typical discrimination. And so that's what they took away. So now if you are in a majority group, you have to prove discrimination just like everybody else. And so the Supreme Court didn't decide whether or not she was discriminated. They decided that her case didn't need that extra burden, the background circumstances burden. Justice Jackson saying that, the Supreme Court really wanted it to be equally applied to all individuals. And honestly, Popok, it's very hard to prove employment discrimination. So just because they've taken that away, it does mean that it probably increases for sure the number of cases that companies are going to have to deal with, right? All those employment lawyers out there are like ka-ching, 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 because, you've now allowed kind of an easier lawsuit for the majority, right? For a lot of people. And so this is probably going to be the most difficult on our companies out there who are going to have to document it as they already do, but document it even more so because, you may have more lawsuits, even if they ultimately lose, there's going to be a litigation burden, let's say, on companies as a result of this.
Yeah, that's a very good analysis and breakdown of the impact on the business community. While we're recording, I'll just break some news here. It looks like the Trump administration is finally going to bring Armando Abrego Garcia back to the United States. He's on his way back. But of course, they filed in Tennessee, of all places, a month ago, a criminal complaint against him for human trafficking. Total and complete BS. Supposedly they're bringing him in, but at least he's going to be back in the United States and get him back under the jurisdiction of Judge Zinnes, even though she's in Maryland. And so that's one good development, day 137 of the Trump administration, because at least this guy is out of El Salvador and on his way back. So I did want to bring that up to our audience. And I'm sure there will be issues related to that going up to the United States Supreme Court very, very soon. That's the nexus there. Speaking of foreign and foreign powers, Mexico and Claudia Sheinbaum, the president there, in a case that was started by her predecessor, Mexico brought a suit against the United States because of all of the guns that proliferate on the other side of the border. There's always these stories on the U.S. MAGA side about build the wall, stop the Mexicans from coming in. Except when they, everybody here wants to go to Acapulco or to the Yucatan Peninsula or go on vacation or Cabo, and they never think about and all of half of our automobiles are built in Mexico, and all the hardworking people that help support the U.S. economy are in Mexico. And Mexico also is on the wrong end of drugs, not just drugs going out, but drugs coming in. And they're also on the wrong side of guns coming in. They're not the gun manufacturers. The U.S. is the gun manufacturers.
Yeah.
So there's been a law in the books for quite some time. This is one of the things that this has to do with voting matters. And a Congress a long time ago got together and because of the strength of the gun lobby at the time and even now, gave them a pass from liability for selling their product in commerce. There's some exceptions to that. But by and large, it ousts state regulation and other civil lawsuits and gives gun manufacturers liability insulation. And that's been on the books for quite some time. And Mexico had a state case that they thought they had a way around it, made its way up to the United States Supreme Court from an appellate decision. And we have a 9-0 ruling that's written by Justice Kagan. And what happened there?
So Justice Kagan said that the lawsuit brought by Mexico against the gun manufacturers can't proceed based on that congressional act. If that congressional act was literally meant to not allow for these lawsuits, because the fact is that the gun manufacturers sell their guns to licensed distributors who then sell their guns to licensed dealers. And so linking it down so far down the road to crime in Mexico was exactly what the act was intended to prevent. And that act really, I think, if we truly want maybe gun reform, we should repeal that act, because to your point, like that is what allows, we just talked about now there being a flood of lawsuits against companies. You know, it protects gun manufacturers from a flood of lawsuits for crimes here, even in the United States. And even if people didn't win all those lawsuits, like, again, there's the litigation burden. So it's definitely putting, benefit to gun manufacturers, this congressional act. But here's the thing is, the Supreme Court, when Congress has written a law clearly, and that's kind of a key term, don't you think, Popok? When they have clearly written the law, the Supreme Court will defer to that because of the separation of powers, right? It's really only when the language is vague, maybe they have written two conflicting or two provisions that seem to conflict, that the Supreme Court will kind of not seem to defer to them as much. But in this case, the congressional action, and also in the case of the reverse discrimination case we just saw, it wasn't so much that the 9-0 majority believed that the gun manufacturer should have limited liability, or that a majority group should not or should be allowed to sue easier. It is that Supreme Court all agreed on how Congress wrote the act and intended it to apply to the facts. And that's, I think, important in case people are wondering, like, how can the Justice Kagans of the world or whatever, like, side with what we think is not a great outcome? It's because that really is what they were looking at. How well does this act apply? And it squarely applied. And so that was why the case that was dismissed, and the Supreme Court upheld that dismissal.
Yeah, and again, we're here on the Kumbaya episode of which I'm not totally buying. The same reason, and it's the same reason I don't buy that the gun rulings that came out a week before
that's a good one.
Are really long-term pro-gun control rulings by the Supreme Court. So 2 cases came out, one in Maryland, speaking of Abrego Garcia in Maryland, and one in Rhode Island. Maryland has had on the books for quite some time, coming off the Sandy Hook elementary school massacre, a ban against AR-15s. There's about 18 states that have it. But AR-15s, which look to be military grade for me, the automatic AR-15 semi-automatic long gun is in the hands of tens of millions of Americans for sport and for target shooting. Unfortunately, they also fall into the hands of teenagers and others in mass shooting events and school massacres and the rest. And so Maryland had a ban, and the question was, did the Second Amendment allow an AR-15? Or is it something that's more akin to military-grade weaponry, like an M16, which the courts have uniformly said is not covered by the Second Amendment? You don't get to have an M16 at your house, or a rocket launcher, or other things. So that was the battle. And on its face, it kind of looked like, when I first saw the headline, it kind of looked like, oh, Supreme Court got their act together and they're going to allow for AR-15 bans. And then you read, it was really procedural. And then you read Kavanaugh's statement, Karen Freeman-Agniflo, our colleague, said to me in Legal AF recently, I didn't know they made statements. I thought it was either a concurrence, a dissent, or they joined the majority opinion. But he made a statement. And the statement was basically inviting the future case where they're going to rule and I think they've got the numbers, that an AR-15 is something that is protected by the Second Amendment. What did you make of that decision? And then the other one was about high capacity magazines
Yes.
in Rhode Island. But I didn't take, I took very cold comfort from this decision. And Kavanaugh basically saying, I don't know about this term or the next term, but we're going to get to the bottom of AR-15s and Second Amendment. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that this is going to be like just the beginning, as you said. Well, I mean, at least that Thomas and Alito and maybe Gorsuch, Kavanaugh want it to be just the beginning. As you said, there was the Maryland decision. There was the Rhode Island decision that had to do with high capacity magazines. And, I thought it was interesting because just a quick recap, the Supreme Court's kind of major decisions on this. The Heller decision in 2008, written by Justice Scalia, was the first time there was enshrined this idea that we have a personal right to bear arms. So if you ever have a Trumper talking about judicial activism, there's a good example. And then we had the Bruen decision not that long ago that again kind of did another huge takedown, let's say, of our trying to get weapons of war out of our system. The Bruen decision, which basically struck down the New York concealed carry law. The Fourth Circuit that was looking at this basically said the reason why they were able to upheld the decision within the framework of we have to look at history, because that's what the Supreme Court kind of initiated that framework, was you don't need this weapon for self-defense. It is an unnecessary weapon. So that way it still fits within the firearm regulation. And what Thomas wrote, that one was just, I couldn't believe he wrote it with a straight face, because he was, of course, dissenting. He wanted the Supreme Court to take up the case. And he said, and I'm just going to, he said that the AR-15s do not fall within the historic exception for dangerous and unusual weapons, because AR-15s are not unusual, but in fact, the most popular civilian rifle in the United States. So the fact that he thinks that they're not unusual for people to basically carry around military style weapons, I can't believe he could say that with a safe face. I mean, the fact is a lot of people, as you say, use it for hunting. Hunting is not a mode of self-defense, right? So this is what the circuits were really looking at, is whether or not the high capacity magazines or whether or not the military style weapons are necessary for self-defense. And the First Circuit in the Rhode Island case said, no, because you don't need to rapidly shoot 10 times to defend yourself. So you don't need this high capacity magazine for self-defense. So that way it also fits within this historical exception. So, if the Supreme Court wants to take up this case and allow for bans on high capacity weapons and military assault rifles, they're really going to have to say that somehow this is something that the founders conceived of, wanted, that people have to carry this for self-defense, because saying that they want it for hunting is not even within part of the Supreme Court's decision, like their opinions. This is why the circuits are all looking at whether or not you need it for self-defense. We do balance our rights. Having it for hunting is not going to overcome, this public security need to defend, to ban it. So anyway, so that's where we are there. Again, no decision made, not taking up the case. As you saw, there's a group of them that certainly want the Supreme Court to take it up again in the future, and we'll have to see if they win out or not.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. They're going to take the case up. They're going to fine AR-15s, at least the 5. I think there's 5 votes for it, unfortunately, but we'll continue to report on that. And there's some other cases that are coming up that you and I will discuss. The summer is filled with holidays and vacations, and now emergency petitions because of Donald Trump. And more opinions will be dropping that you and I will be covering both here on Unprecedented and in Hot Takes along the way. There's probably about 20 or more left. My gut is, if I'm setting a betting line, the the case related to nationwide injunctions for judges, their ability to issue those, and wrapped into the birthright citizenship case will be the last one they'll drop or thereabouts. And then what they're also doing is relisting and setting the list for what they're going to hear starting the first Monday in October. But you and I and our audience are going to be very busy. It's with this administration, it's all gas, no brakes, and hopefully, I think we have a fervent audience here that is here for it. This is another episode of Unprecedented with Dina Doll and Michael Popok here on Legal AF, your news source for all things law and politics. We're trying to be the clearinghouse, trying to be the one-stop shop. Also come over to Legal AF, the Substack, where I will post all of these opinions that we just talked about so that you can, for your reading pleasure, along with analysis of our commentators, including Dina Doll, over on Legal AF, the Substack. So take a moment, hit the subscribe button, and help us continue our march. Our goal is, I think, 700,000 before June is over. Well, I think we're going to make it, but that's only because of the loyalty and the focus of our audience, which we always appreciate. Last word, Dina, coming off your big win of fight fascism, get crap done, and there it is.
I fight for Planned Parenthood. So much good swag. I mean, like I said, just do something, and we're going to you and I are going to try to keep people updated on how they can get involved. But don't feel like the midterms are so far away. We're already organizing now. Get involved now, even if you feel like you're in an overwhelming Republican state. We have to stay informed and engaged. So grateful to be around like-minded people and to be fighting the good fight with you, Popok.
You too. Couldn't ask for a better partner in crime for all that.
Thanks.
Till our next Unprecedented, Dina Doll and Michael Popok signing off. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.